Hello and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me, Tom Sherrington, and my great partner in crime, Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Tom. It's so lovely to see you again. Are you well?
Yeah, really well. And I think it's worth saying to everyone that this is a bit of a watershed episode for us because we are having a change in the way that our podcast is produced. And it means that whilst we get reorganized, this is going to be the last one for a few weeks. So we're going to review what we've been doing so far and then start again when we're ready with more guests. But we're really going to reflect on the podcast that we've been running for the last few years and sort of share some of our highlights from it. So it's been an amazing process, hasn't it?
Oh, phenomenal. It's been the best CPD I've ever had, I think, to get to talk to so many interesting, wise and brilliant people. It's been an absolute joy. I've learned so much. I don't know about you, Tom.
Yeah, and it's become a part of my life in a way to do this podcast. And as our producer Sean tells us, we've now reached a point where we have nearly 3,000 listeners per episode, and that kind of reach was something we never really imagined would happen. So we're really thrilled about that and really honoured that people tune in. In fact, just today, someone was telling me how they had been dialing in and they'd been listening to the episode with Howell Roberts and saying thank you for introducing him to me. And someone else was saying they'd gone back to an episode listening to Sarah Cottingham and how useful. And that's the whole point, isn't it? There are people out there in the educational world who not everyone knows who everyone is, and it's just you need to be able to share and give people a platform. And to me, that's been amazing. I'm looking at the dates of our episodes. Richard Over, episode 1, June the 2nd, 2020. So it's over 3 years. So have you got this whole rhythm now of you just sort of abandoning your family to go into the room to do the recording?
I was such an advocate of no screens for children. No screens for children. Then we started doing this podcast and they regularly get the digital babysitter. Now we're recording in the other room. In fact, they quite like it. Are you filming tonight, Mummy? Because we get to watch the telly. But it's been, like you say, a wonderful part of an evening, especially when we started it during lockdown, to sort of feel connected to what was still happening out there. All the research that was going on, all the great thinking, all of the great work that was happening. And it's been an absolute pleasure to listen to people share that over the years and to also kind of reflect on how it's completely changed my thinking in some areas as well. It's been absolutely instrumental in changing the way I view things, the way I approach things. So it's been such a pleasure, absolute pleasure. I'm reading down this list of guests and thinking, wow. It's like the Oscars. It's wonderful.
Yes, it is great. And I think when we come back in our sort of our reboot, we've got so many. We've got this enormous list of people that we want to talk to, and our only rule. So people ask us like, who do you invite? We don't have that many rules. We try to make sure that we've got a range of people from different contexts and different sector backgrounds. And often people, because of our, we've been sponsored by John Catt all this while. So, when people have had books and so on, we like to give people a chance to talk about them. But that hasn't been the main thing. Only about a third of our guests have been in that category. Sometimes people lobby us and say, can you, some people have agents. Literally, they contact you and say, can so-and-so talk on your podcast? And we always say no. Because we always say, like, if you ask, it's actually the quickest way not to be invited. Because it always feels like we ought to be able to curate a kind of list of people that allows us to kind of make it a rounded set of people. And I feel like that's one of the things I'm proudest of when I look down the list of that. It does feel like a very diverse range of people, and across the kind of classic prog trad axis, I think we've done pretty well to span that in a way which I think is pretty healthy. So we don't want to spend the whole time patting ourselves on the back, but I look down and think, yes, that is a good list of people. What do you think?
Well, I was just going to share with you the question I get asked most about the podcast, which is, what is Tom Sherrington really like?
Maybe not totally honest.
I mean, what's he like? I don't know. I meet him online. I really see him in real life. It's very nice online. But no, I am really pleased. I'm really proud of the way that we've kind of represented all of the different parts of the sector, all different phases, different levels of experience, different lived experiences, leaders, teachers, researchers, academics, university professors, and educationalists. It's been so great to get that kind of 360 view. And I don't necessarily think it's a pat on the back. I think it's us two just going, wow, aren't we lucky to have had that opportunity to listen to those voices? Because to be perfectly honest, you and I sit here and we ask them questions and then sit back and let their wisdom roll out of them. It's not like we've sort of carefully crafted questions for hours in advance, have we, Tom?
No, and I think that's the secret. I mean, so anyone who's thinking, about the preparation, I mean, we've done a podcast recently. Like, we were invited onto the podcast with Craig Barton and Ollie Lovell, and it is a bit like the kind of the thing that was doing the rounds recently of people on their podcasts talking about each other's podcasts. It wasn't quite like that. We had actually a bit of a kind of nerd off about education. It was amazing, but theirs is like they have a plan, they send you questions in advance, and it's not totally scripted or anything, but there's a bit of preparation. And what we like to say to our guests is, come on, and we have no questions in advance, and Emma and I don't even discuss what our questions are going to be. So there's a kind of spontaneity to that / totally unprepared. But it is
responsive, Tom. That's what it is. It's adaptive and responsive in the moment.
Well, it kind of is, because it means you have to listen to what someone's saying and then sort of engage with them. And I don't mean people who prepare their podcasts aren't like that, but it's definitely been a kind of mental workout to listen and engage with people. So let's review some of the things that we've learned. I mean, there's something which, some of the sort of timeless, I feel like, looking back over the back catalogue. One thing I noticed recently was on LinkedIn, someone had shared that they had been listening to the episode with Dr. Robin Jackson, who she was like our fourth guest or something, about the concept of building and being a builder. And to me, I like those metaphors. And she talks about professional development in schools and people being builders. We're creating something, we're making something. We have and to me, that metaphor of building is, rather than say improving, for example, is really lovely. I think that's a nice way of thinking about yourself as a person, but also an organization. And it means that when you're part of an organization, what you're trying to do is contribute to a sort of construction of something amazing. And everyone has to participate and coordinate their activities to a sort of common goal. And it also has a sense of dreaming of something. Like, you don't just build randomly, you aim at something, but then, there's a kind of structure, there's a kind of process to that. But also it means you can imagine the thing before it's made. And I don't know, for me, the metaphor has lots of power. So that was great to hear someone saying it, since they heard that had really influenced the way they thought about their role, like this thing of making, building, constructing. So she is
one of the guests that I still think about, that I really do still think about, this whole builder mentality, because she talked very much about process, but she also talked very much about the attitude that you have to have, that you have to build that team around you. And there won't always be people who see that vision to start off with, but that you have to gradually build that team who do see it. And I just found both her kind of attention to kind of implementation and strategy, alongside this absolutely unwavering positive attitude towards the fact that things can change and develop, absolutely intoxicating. And I keep thinking about what she said, and I keep going back to it, and she pops up on my feed every now and again, and as soon as she does, it's almost like I can hear everything that she was saying again. So she is definitely one of the episodes that stayed with me, and that I kind of think about when I'm thinking about implementation or I'm thinking about strategy. She's the name and she's the approach that has resonated and remained, even though we've spoken to lots and lots of people about leadership. I think you're right that kind of metaphor of actually what you're trying to do is so powerful. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, and she's also written a book called Never Work Harder Than Your Students, which is, I mean, oh my God. if only, but I understand why she's coming from on that front, but that's the dream, isn't it? But that's fantastic. So I mean, let's run through a few others. I mean, I think picking people out is like, we're not trying to, it's just things that you remember, the kind of the concepts and the bigger things. So what other, let's share something that you think you've kind of resonated over the 3 years.
This is a real personal one. I just loved the complete maths geek off that was meeting Mark McCourt and Kieran Mackle. To be perfectly honest, that was a totally self-indulgent one, but I got to talk maths with two people who live, breathe, everything, every fibre of their being is about mathematics. And it was so lovely to have such a rich discussion. And even if you're not a mathematics specialist, if you're in primary and are a teacher of maths, I would thoroughly recommend listening to Kieran talk with such passion and precision about mathematics, and to revisit his book and to listen to Mark again. And I've said it before, that although Mark writes about maths, or as he would have you say, mathematics, not allowed to say maths in Mark's presence, his book is still the one I go to for kind of research informed practice. That first third of his book, Understanding Teaching for Mastery, is still my go-to. So it was an absolute joy to listen to Mark. I could never get tired of listening to that man, to be perfectly honest. That was my personal highlight.
He's so insightful about I remember, it's funny how some things stick in your mind. So I've been to many research sheds. I know I sort of bore on about this, but I have been to just like 40 odd of them. And
they will let you in. You don't have to keep cheerleading for it, Tom. They will let you in.
But one of them was where I saw Mark McCourt doing his session, and it's one of the sessions from Research Ed as well that I remember more than any others, and just the way he ran the room and engaged you, and there's a kind of just a refreshing new take on this whole thing of just opening up students' thinking, but building on what they already know. So he got this fantastic example where he starts by saying something like, what numbers can add up to 10, and then and then making it into negative numbers, and then sort of saying, well, he doesn't even start there. He just says, what 4 plus what equals 10, but then what plus what equals 10, and then what about, how do we know what numbers add up to any numbers? And it all sort of expands into this whole sort of exploration of what operation could you have in the middle then and still do that, and creating this expansive set of connected ideas, starting with one simple idea, which is 4 plus 6 equals 10. And then it just, to me, that was just like, I just wanted to be in his lessons. And I think all the teachers, all the people we speak to, like, if they're not teaching now, that they've been teachers and reference their teaching. It's part of who they are still, even if they're not in a classroom. And he's an absolute classic of that kind. So yeah, then linking to Kieran, I thought you and Kieran I felt I could just leave you to it,
If you'd have left us, I think we'd have still been talking. Yeah, I think the fact that he's devoted such amount of his professional time to really going so deeply with that's not a play on words for his book, but the fact that he had thought so deeply about primary mathematics, because when you teach 12 subjects as a primary teacher, you don't necessarily always have the luxury of doing that, of going deeply with one subject. And I think the work that he's done around that is so useful and so helpful for teachers who are teaching more than one subject. And he, again, like Mark, presents it with such clarity and such precision. And if you read his book, it takes you step by step exactly why you should do things in the order you should do them, and how it all connects together, which you don't necessarily have the time to think through in your planning. So yeah, I could talk to Kieran for hours. Just the difference between manipulatives, we could debate that for hours.
It's brilliant how such special, isn't it? So another couple of people we've had on, who are kind of like, I think are like real specialists in what they're telling you. Someone like, for example, Chris Such talking about reading was just really wonderful. And you get this feeling like the knowledge he has about reading I wish everyone had, because it would, it would just make, and Jenny Webb talking about writing and grammar. So the two of them together is like a kind of set of episodes. You just think, you get this sense of, and we got the maths people, people who just how to run a room with reading, what teachers need to know about reading and its intertwined elements. And then Jenny has this like amazing sort of way of talking about structures of writing and metaphors for that and how to communicate that to students. And you just think, the ideas they have. So you just, I don't know, there's a kind of energy you feed off, isn't there, where you think, oh, God,
yeah,
thinking into it.
Chris Such's book is currently in my fruit bowl in my kitchen. Not because I don't value it, but because I do value it. So I read it so often in so many different places around my house. I couldn't find it this morning. And as I was leaving, I just noticed it in the fruit bowl. And it is one of those books that I recommend to any primary teacher. As soon as you've read it, it illuminates what we should be doing with early reading. And he's so generous that he's donated every single penny of the profits from that book to charity. He hasn't made a single penny out, but he's such a generous educator, and it's pretty.
I think in honesty, in anything he's been, I don't think you realise quite how well it would do.
He did say that. I was attributing him with a wonderful, generous, altruistic streak there. I thought you were going to
give some of it away, but it's amazing. So they're a couple of a genre of people.
Mm-hmm.
And another group of people we've had, I would say I'd call them the kind of like.
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say. I know it.
The thing is, there are a couple of like superstar people we've had on, and who one of them is Doug Lemov, and to me, it's still our most listened to episode and watched episode, and honestly, that was just amazing for me because he is an amazing person, and he's in lots of ways. I mean, what he's created with Teach Like a Champion is extraordinary, but I just thought that, and I would recommend to anyone, like, watch that episode, and you see someone there who is so like earnest and thoughtful about teaching and sort of cares so much about it working and about kids being taught well. It's kind of intense. There are moments there when he's just so sort of, he just punches that through, that kind of sincerity, that sort of absolute commitment to wanting the least confident in the child to feel they have a voice, for example, and what it's like to go to school where no one hears you. You just want. When I listen to that back, I sometimes just go, yeah, like it fires me up.
He's intensely reflective. He really, really is. He just sort of, he thinks so deeply about everything, and I'm so pleased that episode was one of our most listened to, because it's probably the most tired I've ever been in my life. After we'd interviewed him, I'd done 9 solid hours of lectures that day, and they went straight into being interviewed by Doug. So quite how I formed a coherent sentence, I don't know, but yeah, that one with Doug was an absolute powerhouse of an episode, and he's one of the ones that I've gone back and listened to again and again and taken something from each time, because he's dropping so many little kind of pearls of wisdom. You don't pick them all up the first time that you listen to it. So I definitely recommend that. But I think I know the other kind of potential trinity you were going to reference.
Well, yeah. Well, we had some people that came in a 3 that we had a run earlier this year. So we in a run of people, we had the kind of the CogSci run, which was pretty fantastic. So I can't remember the order now, but Dylan Wiliam and Efrat Furst and Sarah Cottingham, and there's a run of those 3 where you think, if you want to be interested in cognitive science and our understanding of how we learn, those 3 episodes are like a CPD session. They're not like a chat show. And Dylan is, I've seen people just have commented about like it's packed with kind of almost his greatest hits. It's like Dylan Wiliam's greatest hits in my episode. It's fantastic. He nails it down, doesn't he? Sort of, this is the whole thing about the difference between, or the links between the concepts of responsive teaching, formative assessment for learning. What do all those words mean? Well, there's a structure to that organising those thoughts makes you realise what's involved and how important it is for teachers to engage with the students in a dialogic way. And then linked to Efrat and all her stuff about encoding. I love that whole thing we got into about her teaching teachers now, and how she has this meta thing of encoding. Like she's trying to teach her students who are training teachers about encoding. So she says, I'm going to have to encode the encoding. And anyway, so for me, and then finally Sarah Cottingham, whose In Action book came out in July with the House of Bells, Making Meaning in Action. But she's so thoughtful and knowledgeable about how we construct meaning during a teaching episode. So the three of them together are like, ooh. So yeah, bang the drum for those three.
It was like the greatest cog-sized starter pack ever.
Yeah. Totally,
if you want to get going and get interested and get up on the right foot with kind of research informed practice, cognitive science, that's the three to start with, most definitely. And I will admit I have gone back and listened to those three again and again and again, because
I feel like, you know, Dylan Wiliam is someone who, you know, he's probably more quoted, well, him and Dan Wiliam together probably, than anyone else, and for good reason. And he's done the miles. And I enjoy the fact that we share various things in common, like we both taught the Smile maths package back in the 80s. And also, you know, there's some other things like playing the bass guitar, you know, which is quite funny. But he's, you know, but he's also, this is the thing, science and maths specialist. But the three of those people are really brilliant at understanding what it means for teachers. So we're not just talking about experiments and findings and studies that are kind of a bit abstract and obscure. We're talking about what does it mean when you're doing it in the lesson, using the ideas. And I think that comes through from all three of them, that sense that cognitive science has to be useful to us in it. If it's going to have value, it's got to turn into things we can do. Mm-hmm. And I think hopefully that came through really well. Okay, so
one of the things I've really liked, just one last thing, is the fact that we've had some fantastic practicing school leaders on here. Sam Strickland, Sonia Thompson, people who are talking not only from a very research-informed perspective, but kind of boots on the ground, day in, day out.
Caroline Derbyshire.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been such a delight to hear theory in action and actually seeing
Asagi. I mean, all these people, head teachers or former head teachers, sharing the world of leadership.
It's been so brilliant to hear so many diverse lived experiences of leaders in the system, and actually what's happening in schools right now that people can learn from and think about and potentially translate into their own practice. So a big thank you to those people who did a full day's graft at school and then came and spoke to us in the evening as well to share their thoughts.
Well, of course, it's like we select the people, so we can't pretend that to be anything that's representative. But I think it's interesting that early on we talked to John Thompson and Johnny Utley, who are well known for promoting. In fact, they just launched a new website about putting staff first, which is their whole concept for creating the right culture. But then listening to most recently Caroline Derbyshire and Vic Goddard, the sense of responsibility they carry as leaders of schools, and then the challenge is the honesty around that sense of the weight they carry on their shoulders, and yet the kind of absolute commitment to it, to the point where you'd think the way they project, you might be thinking the way they project the level of responsibility is going to want to say, oh my God, who'd ever want to be a head teacher? But actually, in the way they talk about their community and the people they serve and supporting the teachers, it actually makes you want to be one, because you're thinking, I'm inspired by them. I want to be Vic Goddard. I want to be Caroline Derbyshire. I want to be the person who could do that and have that role. And I feel like they kind of fly the flag for leadership, even whilst talking about how difficult it is. It's just pretty amazing thing to put off.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, you've been there so more recently than me, so it's like connecting.
I've been wrangling with a budget today, Tom.
Well, I know. But I feel like, there's a kind of a need to sort of champion. I think this is something we don't always do well in our system, but it's difficult to do both, isn't it? To talk about the honest challenges that teachers have and the reason why it's not everyone's preferred job, but at the same time as the fact that all these people, and they have so much to contribute, so intellectually interesting as well as kind of emotionally satisfying and rewarding, that we're doing this good work. It's difficult to get that message out there, isn't it? This is why teaching in the world of education is so brilliant, that, you know, it's full of all these people for a start, but you can't soft soap the challenges. There's no point in pretending to people that it's easier than it is.
It's the peaks and troughs. The high days are really high, the low days are really low.
Yeah, but then you listen to, I don't know, let's say Vic, you'd want to go and work at your school tomorrow because you just feel like, with him there, like, I'm with you. I'm just, and I think that's important that we have people who can do that. Then there's a whole other group of people out there. So there's the people who tell it as it is in terms of the challenges some kids have got. So I mean, I'm thinking there people like
Frances Akinde,
Sufyan.
Yeah.
Who are you thinking of?
Frances Akinde.
Oh yeah.
When she spoke so beautifully.
Yeah. So, you know, Frankie came on, she talked about being a Senko, being a fairly, you know, being someone who's often the only black leader in a room of leaders, and special needs schools feeling marginalized, so that she feels like she's coming from the margins, and she talks about her own ADHD and stuff like that all the time. And yet, like, she's her thing is breaking the bias. She works in all these different spheres supporting young people, and that's a punchy episode. And then also Tracy Adams. Sonia's been on twice. She's one of the few people we've had on twice. Tracy Adams and Sonia. I'm not sure if we broke the news about this, but they are sisters. But what extraordinary pair of people they are. So they work together, and now Tracy's now right this year is the head of a school of her own, but they like head and deputy head of a school, sisters, and what an amazing school. But they talk about the kids, what they bring to their school, and I think one of the most powerful episodes we've had was, he'll be pleased to say this, he'll be pleased with saying this, because he likes to, he's funny about it. Sufi and Sadiq, and the episode he talked about his own back, that was very powerful, wasn't it?
It was. I'm just laughing because have you seen him do his gag about the standing ovation? Have you seen him do this?
No.
If I tell you,
tell listeners, what is that? What does he say?
He makes before he does his keynote, makes everyone stand up and clap. Then he takes a video of it with himself smiling. He says, well, now I'm going to post this on YouTube because you've all given me a standing ovation, so it doesn't really matter how my keynote goes now.
Very good.
but whenever I think of him, I think of him doing this gag with the standing ovation, which is why I was laughing as soon as you mentioned his name.
Yeah, but Sufyan is a storyteller, and there are other people in common. So Hal Roberts, we had on similar, like they have this amazing gift for presenting as the kind of, you know, light touch, humorous person who then like absolutely gives you the punch in the stomach of emotional power with the message. And you know, when Sufyan talked about walking the walk to school through the kind of, you know, the urine stench in the lift in the tower block, and that's someone's start to the day every day, meeting the teacher who's like picked up their latte from the cafe, you know, the kind of worlds colliding, and that need to kind of bridge that social gap, and not just talk about you know, that social gap, poverty gap in people, which affects people's perception of their identity and their potential life and so on. It is pretty profound, and it makes you think, whoa. But then he's like when he started reading off all the charities he's a trustee of, it was I was thinking, oh my God, I'm like the worst person alive, because he's so like multiply engaged, isn't he? It's extraordinary.
Yeah. And him and Hal Roberts, that kind of whole botheredness approach, really thinking about where children are coming from before they arrive at the door of the school, I think is a really important pair of episodes to potentially listen to, is to listen to Hal and to listen to Sufyan, in terms of life beyond school gates, which is what I've taken from listening to those two, is to think about the kind of the motivations and the experiences that children have before they arrive in a classroom, which is a really nice pair to kind of reflect on if you listen to them together. And it wasn't deliberate that we had them so close together either, was it? It was just complete chance, but they do go together so nicely. You haven't mentioned Jim Knight yet.
No,
we are however many minutes in and you've still not mentioned Jim. Come on.
Okay, so I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I sitting as we're recording this, and it's one of those things with the time delay. But by the time this goes out, I will have met him at his conference. That would have been just the week before. So Oliver Caviglioli and I are going to Orlando for the annual conference of the instructional coaching group that Jim runs, and it's actually at SeaWorld in Florida, which is insane, in a big hotel there. But yeah, and there's like 1,500 people going to be there talking about instructional coaching. So it's a big thing in the US, and it's something which is developing in the UK in multiple forms and has been for a while. And it's something we discuss a lot. So to talk to him directly was great. I mean, he's so his work is so influential, and he represents a kind of mindset around coaching which is very focused on teachers driving things, being the owners of their own solutions, but yet the coach being so key to that. So I feel like he does allow in his work allow for a wide range of interpretations of the coaching structures and things. So Oliver and I take a lot of inspiration from him in the stuff we try to do, because he does keep you focused on the teacher being the person who then has to own their own goal and pursue their own process. Mm-hmm. And he does push back a little bit on things which get a little bit too top down, a bit too systematized, and that's great. So you've got he represents a whole sort of philosophy which I feel like is coherent and healthy and needs to be explored. So yeah, to me, I mean, it was a bit like meet a hero moment. But he's so generous. I mean, he's always saying that, like he's so kind to us, and saying that he's enjoys the conversation, and he's just such a wonderful person. So I really, really enjoyed that.
When are you going?
Well, last week.
I want to know how you get to go to Florida and I just go to various places off the M62. I've got it all wrong.
We're kind of quite, I'd say, I don't know if we're nervous as such, but we're excited that we're going to be talking at this event and sharing some of our thoughts about how coaching can be supported by structures rather than sort of inhibited by them. So I think and it's also interesting talking to people in the US. And one of the things about our podcast is we've had various people from the US, and the systems aren't the same, clearly, but it's finding the common ground, which is so great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's been obviously meeting, seeing him was brilliant. Okay, wow. So I mean, if you had to, another sort of group of people, I feel it's been amazing to have, are people who are kind of like sort of communicators about teaching in ways which they kind of don't need to do, but they are motivated to by numerous things, and some of them are kind of right in the system, and some are kind of I guess supporters of it. And so I'm thinking of a couple of different groups. So there's Craig Barton and Adam Boxer are kind of like the output between the two of them of ideas about, so in Craig's case, maths, and in Adam's and wider teaching, but maths plus wider, and Adam the same for science plus behavior management. And through their blogging and through Craig's podcasting, I think they're phenomenal people. Really do. So to me, like hearing how they present themselves and what motivates them and the way they think, they're different, the different types of people. But they were a week apart in our podcast last summer, and 22.
Craig has written the biggest John Catt teaching book ever.
Great.
so many tips. It's what, 3 inches thick.
Yeah.
Definitely incredible.
Adam's just, he's, I mean, again, it's something of an intensity, a bit like Dogomov in some ways. There's just been really a kind of sense of conviction. There's a kind of joyfulness, a kind of enthusiasm which comes through, but there's also this total conviction that this is important and it matters, and we can't muck about with it. And I love that. I love that energy that they bring to the discourse on Twitter and through all this. I think they're just phenomenal. So to hear them share their ideas, I really recommend the Adam Boxer episode, just for talking about, say, his reluctant engagement with behaviour management. Because I hate talking about behaviour management, but
and it's our only episode with an ice cream van in it as well.
Yeah, it did. It went past the window. It went past the window as we were talking to him.
Yes.
What they both have in common, and this is funny, is that they both are up in the attic. So they both have like an office in their house, it seems, which is upstairs with a sloping ceiling. So to me, that really struck me, the parallel between them. Like, there's Adam, and then there's Craig sort of upstairs in this. You imagine this room where, like, this is the powerhouse. This is their kind of where all the ideas are generated, escaping through, like,
squirreled away in the eaves,
snatching time away from family obligations to try to do all this stuff. And I think that's not easy. So I have total respect for them for that. And the other two people, Laura McInerney and Becky Allen, who are kind of a bit of a duo through Teacher Tap, and we've interviewed both of them. And that, again, through their sort of engagement with the system, the contribution they make to our discourse, I think, is brilliant. I mean, absolutely adore both of those interviews.
I particularly enjoyed the look on your face when Laura told you your Teacher Tap score didn't count.
My Teacher Tap score didn't count. Yeah, that is.
I don't know if I should ever forget.
I know, it's funny because Teacher Tap is brilliant, and they have nearly, I think, they've passed the 10,000 mark, right? So they've got 10,000 teachers who, I'm not sure if they get that every day, but it's that scale now. It's on that kind of area daily, which is just amazing. I don't think there's anything like that in any other world sphere in this country. They get that number of people polling every day. But the people who are not teachers, who sort of have the app, who maybe used to be a teacher but aren't in a school and therefore can't talk about their school, I asked what happens to our results, and basically their answer was they ignore them. So I was like, so all those times I've been sort of like putting my penneth into the question of the day was a total waste of time.
Into file 13.
Yeah, they don't need you. So I was kind of like, okay, obviously you get why would anyone want to care what I think about the poll? Because I don't have a lesson to teach today. I haven't done 5 lessons, and so fair enough. But yeah, I love the honesty of that. But yeah, I mean, and Becky Allen is absolutely fantastic, just relating to the whole thing of being an education kind of professional, where she's done so many great talks. I kind of put her in the deep end because I was reminding her of talks she gave years ago, which were with no preparation. And she was like, oh my God, we're talking about that one, are we? And she had to like remember the case she'd made like 5 years ago. But she's brilliant at like relating to the whole thing of having kids in school now and having to sort of be the receiver of the education system as well as the kind of the thinker about it. And that's so interesting, isn't it? Like, not everyone talks about their kids' experience at school, but she was quite open so that challenge. Yeah. Do your kids' parents, do your kids' teachers know that you're on here talking about them at school?
I'm the chair of governors at the school as well. Yeah, I'm very, very lucky. Their school is fantastic. The teachers are wonderful, and I've never named the school, and I never would, but I'm absolutely blessed that they go to a truly brilliant primary school with fantastic teachers. And just whenever anybody says, where'd you go to see good practice, I always say there. because it's just completely solid and they're an absolute joy. But they know that sometimes when I'm talking about my children that they'd be able to work out it's their school, but I don't think I've ever said anything bad because I have nothing bad to say about it.
Well, that's good. I mean, you have to sort of, you know, be sensitive about these things. People don't always want to be discussed. It's a bit like what happens to me when my wife goes to work and people tell her they like our garden, and she goes, "How do you know about my garden?" I go, "Well, I've been tweeting more pictures of it," and that sometimes, yeah, oversharing maybe, but you know. Okay. So look, I mean, we've had so many guests, and it's over 3 years, and it's been amazing. Some of the themes that have come through. We've talked a little about leadership, and talked, you know, some of the things that are in maths and writing, and one of the things I think is that we've talked about is CPD. You know, we're talking about Heidi Hughes and mentoring. That was fantastic. Cognitive science, but behaviour has been one. So we talked to Tom Bennett really early on, and I think there was a bit of a faux pas in that episode, wasn't there?
I misworded my opening question, and I meant to say I was under the impression that the book was just a secondary book, so I hadn't read it as quickly as I potentially could have done. But it came out all wrong, and I said I deliberately haven't read your book, which wasn't the best start to the issue. I think that was my naivety as a co-host writ large, right there.
Yeah, but you know, there's a good recovery, and if you combine the input of, say, you know, Tom and Sam Strickland, who's another person who's been on twice, you just have this rich knowledge for two of them, between them, around behavior management. You know, Tom's obviously famous for like all his thinking around behavior, running the room, and Sam is a school leader doing it in his own school, and obviously supporting others with his own books. So their ideas are fantastic, and sometimes I feel like, you know, like a lot of these things, there's a lot of mischaracterization and kind of shallow reading of people's views on it, and I've sat several days with Tom in his training room, and people who think that he represents a kind of like draconian school culture is just literally no idea what he's talking about, because he isn't talking about that. He's talking about routines, norms, things which support teachers to be successful. It's very human, and it's important. And just like other people we've mentioned get kind of fired up about the wrongs of things, what fires Tom up is seeing teachers struggling and kids struggling in environments which could be properly ordered, and they're not safe, and they're not comfortable, and the kids aren't learning, and that's worth getting bothered about. And I feel like, you know, I often, I don't know why, I mean, Tom's he can stick up for himself, but I often feel like, why does someone who I feel contributes so much to our discourse get such a hard time from people sometimes? I think, why are you trying to make it harder for us to hear sensible things which will really make schools better? And honestly, if more schools were doing the things that Tom is advocating, our system would be way, way better than it is, and there's no doubt about it.
It's interesting as well, because Sam's school that he runs, 2,000 pupils, it's the size of a small town, basically, and it's an all through, so it's 4 to 18, and I go there quite a lot, various bits and bobs. Fully recommend going to one of his open days, but it's one of the warmest, most caring, nurturing places that you could go to, but just really, really well run, really, really well ordered, happy children, teachers with the space to teach. And again, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to assume what you think something's like until you've actually seen it in practice. And I would fully advocate going to have a little visit to see what some of these systems look like in action on the ground.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, look, I mean, this is probably, I don't know how this comes through. It's hard to know, isn't it? But I'm hoping if people are listening to this, they're kind of getting a sense of, I don't know, like the range of people that participate in our system and how exciting it is to have all these voices. And hopefully through our podcast, people have been introduced to people they may not have heard of before, or just had a chance to hear them speak when they haven't heard them speak at an event. And our most recent guests, this side of the summer, Adam Shaha, just what a beautifully sensitive, creative person he is, sharing his passion for science and then communicating ideas to children through his work as an author now, as well as still being a teacher. And of course, Ben Newmark and his amazing sort of sensitivity and insight into SEND and bringing his sort of personal perspective with his own daughter's education into it. And I think those two are just beautiful episodes. So I'm really proud of that. And it's been amazing. So the last thing I want to mention before we wrap up is actually how we've done quite a few of our own. I actually think talking to you as well is definitely the best bit of this whole thing.
Oh, God.
And I don't like it's true. It's just like, your wisdom about teaching is amazing. And I'm going to just sort of finish this up, book plug deluxe. This arrived today. I think it's quite significant that on our last day of recording this podcast with our current setup ahead of the break, this book landed on my mat today. Initium, to use its proper pronunciation. Cognitive Science Research and Form Primary Practice. It's fantastic. Emma, how do you find the time to write a book as thorough as this, as well as all the other things you do?
I don't know. I think I just got a bit cross. And so I wrote it.
But it's a lovely exploration of how cognitive science works in specifically a primary context for children who are forming their learning from the start, and it's fantastic. So
thank you.
Congratulations. I hope it does really well. And
thank you. I would just say though, I know it says primary practice on the front of it, but anybody who's secondary who's read it said Bradley Bush has read it, and Cole Hendrick read it, and who was it that Oliver's read it, and they were saying that they have said every secondary teacher needs to read this because they kind of know where it comes from. So I may have made another classic turn of faux pas by saying it's cognitive science research for primary practice, because actually if you really want to understand how children learn, you kind of have to need to understand where the building blocks came from. So although it's primary, I would definitely say if you're secondary, you might want to have a little dabble, have a little look and see what primary practice is. And especially, and this is kind of a plea from me, especially if you're delivering training to primary colleagues and you are a secondary background, please have a little look at it.
Totally. I mean, and it's, the fact that anything that says primary on it, of course, it should be for everyone, really, because we all ought to know what that is. And I'm just going to finish this, if you don't mind, by the conclusion of this book, using the Latin, which you put all the way through. Legatum et ultra, legacy and beyond. And then you've written, teaching is legacy, legacy is therefore duty. And it's like that sense of, I don't know, there's something about that's like, there's a kind of, that sense of duty and that sense of kind of purpose that comes through everyone that we've talked to, I think is universal. Everyone we speak to has a real commitment to the children that they're teaching, wants to do the best they can and recognises the difficulty. But anything that we're doing and sharing hopefully contributes to that, and people out there doing it day to day. And I'm well aware of the fact that I don't teach 5 hours a day. And it's a lot easier to do nearly any other job except that. So, thank you to all the people listening who are taking anything we say and using it for actually teaching students, children in their classrooms. Really, it's amazing. We wouldn't be doing this if there was no purpose to serve in that sense. So thank you to everyone listening. Thank you, Emma, for being an amazing co-host.
Thank you, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this podcast with you, and thank you again to everybody who's kind of listened, and thank you again for putting in the hours with the children out there, because that's the most important work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think it remains for us to say a huge thank you to Sean Ryan, our producer. This is our last episode working with Sean, but it's been brilliant, and he's been absolutely amazing to support us all the way through. And we're looking forward to reconfiguring. There'll be a small gap while we get a different production kind of process working, but we'll still be Mind the Gap, and we'll still be Tom and Emma, and we'll be back with more guests as soon as we possibly can. But thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we'll see you all really soon.